Thank you all for being with us here at the inaugural Reinforce. There's a lot of change that's going on, right? One of the reasons why I think a lot of folks are here is because this is a new environment for people. As straightforward as it can be to manage, people have a lot of questions. They want to see what other people are doing as they move into the brave new world in AWS. There's a lot of reasons why people go, whether it's scalability or reliability, geographic distribution. And so security comes along, right? People want to understand from a community of their peers how it works. And I've been very impressed so far with the number of people I've found here who are actually consuming and producing content. Unlike some other large security shows where it's largely marketing activities, you're actually able to learn things here from smart folks who may have the same questions you do. And that's one of the reasons that I'm here today. And I'm here with Zach Vinduska, because as Zach and the ClubCorp organization were moving forward in their own strategy, right, to take advantage of these benefits inside of AWS, he recognized, having done security for a long time, that security changes as I move into that environment, as we're all seeing, right, as we move into this environment. And so what we're going to talk about today is how Zach and his team were able to address those challenges, the role that Alert Logic played in it. And we're hoping that you're going to be able to take some value from this in terms of your own definition of the way that you're going to think about managing your security moving forward, and make sure that AWS remains that secure component of your architecture, the way in which Zach's done at ClubCorp. So I'll leave it to Zach.
He is so smooth. I am just an IT guy, so I'm not a salesperson, so just want to let you know. So I'll talk to you a little bit about ClubCorp. So we own and operate country clubs, about 200 throughout the US. And I joined the company 4.5 years ago. And at that point, we were pretty much all on-prem. We had a very long-in-the-tooth infrastructure, and we had to make some investments. So at the same time, we had a new CEO coming in, or CIO coming in, and he was very cloud-forward and cloud-centric. So we kind of decided to go ahead and make that hop. And we went very strong cloud first on every solution we were bringing in. It made sense because we acquire and divest clubs a lot. And for us to be able to actually acquire and divest a club without a 1990s mentality of rolling out a bunch of infrastructure at one, but be able to actually turn one up and turn one down, saved us a lot of money. And it saved us a lot in our approach. But as we started going to the cloud, we had to look at our security posture and our practices around security and what we had to do differently. And there was a lot of change. I mean, and it's not just the discussion on finances and that you're going into an OpEx world and if it impacts your EBITDA, but literally how the entire realm is changing when you start using cloud products and when you start using mobile access to things. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that here later on. But we opened up a 3-year roadmap. And the very first year of our roadmap was to figure out how we could get more awareness as to what was going on in our environment. Because we needed to increase the maturity of it for sure. And we didn't have that. So it was clearing the mud off the windows. Alert Logic and a couple other vendors brought in to help us get there for that piece. Second one, of course, is we're trying to make sure we're PCI compliant. We're looking at some ways to do security orchestration, automation, so that we can react to our issues quicker. I think that's that's probably all the stuff that's up there. I can read it down there.
So if you think about the changes that we've seen, right, in the environments, I'm not sure how many people are from this geographic area, but almost 25 years ago, right, we built the first managed security services at BBN down the street in Cambridge. And security was very much a perimeter-focused activity. Hard, crunchy outside, soft, chewy center, right? And you see that that's really changing over the course of time. And as you flash forward to today, where we're standing today, the nature of that deperimeterization has sort of reached its zenith, right? I'm not only talking about a user connecting to an application and trying to secure that communication as a means of understanding security. We're down to the task level as I get down to Lambda functions, right? So security has changed very much. And that's one of the critical shifts, right? If you think about the nature of the way in which we do our jobs as security professionals, what we end up looking at changes now that the world around us has changed in terms of the access that we're providing to people. What used to be considered almost an end user has really become a customer. Think about how many functions you allow your customers to come in and touch inside your own organization. And so the way in which you've had to change your security to manage those different kinds of relationships, that more integrated, that pervasive internetworking style of relationship, it's changed the nature of the architecture of the systems that you're looking to protect. At the same time, and this is one of the questions and the challenges that Zach brought up, is it changes the types of technology you're going to have to use, right? The tools that I use to secure that individual server that was used to secure that really relatively balkanized environment, very, very different than the tools I'm going to have to use in this more distributed cloud-centric environment. So what does that tell me? Right, as an organization that was probably managing very good security on a Monday, and then I decided to move it up into the cloud and I had to start managing security on Wednesday in a different place, well, the tooling's different. Information is different. The normalization of the logs are different. All of the ways in which we traditionally thought about managing security changes inside this environment. And I think that's one of the big challenges that Zach faced.
Yeah,
as well.
we found that the days of the moat and gate and wall are gone. As we moved, and we're a hybrid, so AWS is a big piece of it, but we have a couple other ones as well. But as we moved our workloads out there and we mobilized our user, our consumer of product, we quickly figured out that a lot of our workloads every day go from the consumer to it to our workload without ever touching a firewall that we set at home. So the firewall at the home office or the data center just becomes a little less important in our model of how we're going to security. And it's certainly not addressing our challenges with securing those endpoints, because the endpoints are in the wild now, right?
Mm-hmm. One of the great things in that description of the way things have changed is that I think AWS has done a great service for us as security people in terms of defining clearly a shared responsibility model. Having been building security technologies and companies for about the last 30 years, it's very rare you find a security company telling you the things it doesn't do for you, right? Listen, I'm really looking to get strong protection. Okay, here's a response technology, right? I'm looking to prevent attacks. Okay, here's a way in which you can detect them when they're ongoing. As a community, as a security community, we've really morphed the language so it doesn't provide as much clarity as it should. But AWS has done a very good job of saying, all right, this is the stuff we're going to handle, right? From the bricks up to the hypervisor. That's what we're going to handle as part of AWS. And that is a burden of responsibility that would ordinarily be managed by your own IT teams. But it is not set it and forget it security in the cloud. So for purposes of perfect clarity, I think that understanding the portions that AWS will handle for you, and then the other portions that we as organizations which take advantage of this platform are responsible for, it's a very important distinguishing characteristic of what happens here, right? I'm assuming that most of the folks who are here in attendance understand the goodness that's coming out of the AWS platform for them. And this is the area, these are the areas where you're going to be looking to folks around this room to help you understand it better. And I know that this customer responsibility portion, particularly as you move in your earliest stages into the cloud, can be a real challenge because, as Zach mentioned, the technologies are different, the practices are different. Even the information that you gather is very different, right? Traditional fundamental concepts like IP addresses just don't have as much relevance. The management of IAM, your identities and your access management have a very different context in an AWS environment, and all of that falls upon the shoulders of the organization making that move in a shared responsibility model.
Yeah, and talking about responsibility, and this is kind of plays into that, we decided to make sure that we have a strong understanding of where the risk lies, and yes, I'm going to talk a lot about risk here. We started creating kind of a RACI document for each of our cloud vendors that sit down and called it out line by line where the risk resides, if it's us or them. And I know some security people are going to say risk is all yours, it doesn't belong to the cloud. You'll have some products and vendors who will say they will take ownership of it, but until you document it and lay it out, you won't know. And so we went ahead and created that. We went ahead and worked with we made some heat maps so we could understand what we need to account to first. We keep a risk register per cloud provider for us. And then the last one, and we're still fleshing out how this works, but being that we're hybrid cloud, on-prem, we started looking at how we map all the products like Alert Logic to our environments. So, and as it started writing these out and drawing them on a diagram, it helped us understand, okay, so Alert Logic handles, and I'm now sounding like a sales guy, they handle some of my on-prem, and they're masked across almost every one of my cloud vendors. So the value that they bring is across all of them, where I have other ones that are kind of point solutions for just one place or another place. So that was another document. So that's some of our practices that we're doing to try to make sure that we understand the risk and cloud and can associate it.
And so as you're trying to figure out how you get that information together, right, there's a real set of challenges that are different when you move into a hybrid environment the way that Zach just described it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When I think about the way in which one collects the data, right, so the last company I built was called Barclay. We built endpoint protection, right, and the way in which you gather information for that, it varies, right? Sometimes it relates to the objects that are trying to execute, sometimes it relates to the behaviors that are ongoing. If I'm watching the network to see if there's evidence of some compromise ongoing, I'm actually going to be watching. Maybe I'll be doing some promiscuous Ethernet mode sniffing. I'm going to be gathering the information that I need to be able to derive the result, which is there a way I can take data from orthogonal data sets, bring it together in such a way that I can recognize an attack which might otherwise not be recognized? Or can I use that same data in a way which proactively allows me to prevent something from getting a foothold in the system, being able to elevate its privilege, what have you? To do any of those things, you have to be thinking about how you collect that environment. And one of the chief challenges as we move into AWS is understanding where are the different places I can get that data from. And also remembering the immense scalability that exists, the elasticity of the AWS environment, realize it may be a ton of it coming at me, right? So collection has its own set of challenges. The things I'm going to be looking for are going to be a little bit different than when I had them on fixed IPs, fixed IDs, right? Very different kinds of information I'm going to be gathering. And I have to be thinking about the scale, right? Lots of information. So that's sort of the collection challenges. Second piece is once I get that in, I've got to analyze it, right? And it's not as simple as I can look for one data source. I'll look in this one log file that tells me something bad happened. I have to be looking across multiple data sources to understand the complexities of a modern attack, right? Everybody remembers WannaCry, right? WannaCry had 5 different stages. You wanted to be able to recognize what was going on in those stages to recognize the campaign was in place. You also want to be able to take several swings at the ball, right? So your analysis should be able to show you through the course of a campaign's lifetime, can I recognize it, can I see it? So that analysis is important. For those of you who are looking very tired, you're probably in the security industry, right? One of the biggest problems we have, MIT did some great writing on this a couple of months ago, we got a lot of burnout, right? We got a lot of burnout because there's a lot of noise, right? So I believe that that capacity to validate the information before you report it up is critical, right? Because you're not just validating for false positives, which is a big deal, right? I think Poneman reports like 81% of alerts are not reliable, right? So that's not so good. You got to do this validation step to make sure that when you take advantage of the teams who are going to be responsible for responding, you're only reporting on the things that actually matter, things that are real. And you also want to use this capability to validate to make sure you're not having duplicates, right? If anyone's ever seen a campaign in flight, a single corrupted machine that's doing a lateral spread is going to create a lot of noise. And you're going to see a lot of the same stuff from a lot of different places. And if you're not being conscious of that in your validation phase, you can be flooding people with that reporting. And then the last step is being able to do that response. So in the case of the alert logic offering, right, our responsibility is to be able to gather that information across this through the multiple platforms that are supported, be able to look at that information and analyze it using the information that our data scientists and our researchers come up with all the time, validate it, and then contact folks when we see stuff that matters. And all of this in the 15-minute SLA. And I think that's an important concern for folks who are managing these kinds of business.
Yeah, and when we started with Alert Logic, so my security team spent most of their time chasing ghosts, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we had a lot of different point solutions. I didn't really have the collect and correlate model that we have here with Alert Logic. And I don't know if any of you guys are in the hiring position, but it's impossible to find people. So you pretty much have to hire out, not hire in. And what this allowed me to do is free up those resources that I had found and actually have them do things that mattered a little bit more than chasing ghosts that meant nothing.
Yeah, and I think those ghosts are a big deal, right? Because if you think about the breadth of this, think about the amount of information that's being provided. I think some of you have probably read the most recent FireEye mandate report, which says, I think it's 76 or 78 days of dwell time, right? If you look at the DIBR that just came out from Verizon, the DIBR says there's a disconnect between corruption and exfiltration, which is in the minutes, and detection and resolution, which is in the months, right? And so there's a real problem with that. And I think it's mainly because that job of identifying this kind of information is a brutal one, right? The amount of information that comes into an unfiltered, unfiltered, unoptimized system where you're not taking advantage of analytic technique to distill it down into a limited group of messages is completely out of control, right? And so this just gives you an idea of what goes on in the Alert Logic SOC, right? So 3 million incidents get distilled down to 10,000 events that get passed across a body of hundreds of experts inside the SOC, and really less than 1% of the things which are flagged as critical end up having to be reported because that distillation can happen. Now, I don't know, all of your organizations, some of them are probably quite large, you may even have a pretty robust SOC infrastructure on your own. But for us, what this takes, it takes over 36 threat researchers and data scientists to gather the information and normalize it so you can perform your analytics on it, right? It literally takes hundreds of folks who work in the SOC 24/7 to be able to look at the data as it comes through and take that last pass on it to validate it and figure out what to report. And then this is actually the ultimate response, right? The ability to actually contact with meaningful data at a tempo and at a volume that's actually consumable. That is a bright screen. So as you start thinking about in this environment that we're standing in today in AWS, right? There's a lot of places where we can gather important data, right? There's a lot of great work that's gone inside of AWS to be able to generate the kinds of information that can be then combined with other information to come up with the best constructs for identifying if something malicious is happening and to ensure that things that are malicious don't happen. So for us, at Alert Logic, there's a lot of this consumption of information that's being provided through the Amazon framework, whether it's through Guard Duty or CloudTrail or what have you, because that information provides the essential components of those analytics we were talking about a little bit earlier. And for us, this gets fed into the same back-end model for those of you who have any environments outside of AWS, things like on-prem systems, or if you're working in a hybrid cloud, to be able to tie all that information together and be able to derive an identification of a campaign or attack that may not be solely focused in a homogeneous environment, like it's only in AWS, or it's only on-prem, or it's only one place or another. So all this good information that gets provided not only serves to help secure the AWS environment, but it actually can be used through the Alert Logic infrastructure as a component of analysis of identifying threat that exists outside as well. And in order to be able to do this, we've spent a lot of time making sure that we understand the relationship between the new AWS technologies, existing security problems, the way in which we're already doing processing and analytics from more traditional sources of data that existed prior to the uptick in the AWS infrastructure. And so this involves things like being certified across multiple technologies and multiple competencies here with the AWS family in order to be able to make sure that we're taking the most effective advantage of the technologies they provide, especially as a technology partner. And what you've seen a lot, and there's been some writing about it today, is the work that's gone on in the Security Hub.
Let me speak about Security Hub?
Sure. Well,
sure. I mean, we are pretty young in our approach to Security Hub. We've got it implemented. We're looking at a couple of the tool sets. I know one of the things is going to be the I can't remember what it's called now. I'm having a moment where we can do specific searches on, I'm trying to remember what it is. It's the ability to
correlate?
no, that's not the word I'm looking for. I had one of these moments now. So we have a lot of compliance issues. We have PCI issues. We have SOCs. And we needed to be able to do searches across the sections, for what it's called in AWS, where you can actually go and look to see if you have any issues in that space.
Oh, like the CIS fundamentals?
Yeah, and they have that in other products as well, and we don't have anything that spreads across all of them, but we're looking to use AWS, and we're hoping you guys figure out how to do it across all of them for us.
Well, and I think that this is a really important thing that Zach describes, right? Because this is new technology that's being developed all the time, every day, and as organizations advance in their adoption of AWS, it's natural to be looking to these next stages. For us as Alert Logic, we actually can feed our events into Security Hub because there are some folks who consume it that way. For other individuals, they want to consume the information that comes out of things like Guard Duty, but see it processed in a different way and perhaps populate that into something which is a more heterogeneous means of looking at the information, where they've actually got a large legacy advancing into AWS, but they have to get that information in both places. And in order to be able to do that, right, we want to be able to gather the information and populate it where it's necessary. So here, this is just a simple example of the way in which we gather information and post it up to Security Hub. And what you'll notice going on here is that we're taking the same feeds, right? So think of it this way. The same kinds of information I could gather off an endpoint or a network sniffer or some other part of the hybrid cloud infrastructure, I can gather that information and it gets processed much the same way. It goes through those various steps, right? It goes through that analysis step. Is this something I really care about? It goes through that validation step. Am I sure that this is something I really care about? And before you get to the point where you push it up into Security Hub, where a lot of folks are going to be gathering information from, you make sure all that diligence happens first. Right, because the enemy of security is a combination of noise and complexity, right? And we know that as security people. And so by doing it this way, we're not simply taking the feed and throwing it whole cloth into Security Hub and hoping that people can take advantage of it and understand it. Instead, very, very specific information provided about the types of attacks that we're seeing or the types of misconfiguration that we're seeing or what have you, pushed up into Security Hub where people might be expecting to consume it. So on the seats when you arrived, there's a series of raffle tickets that are available regarding what's going on over in the booth at Alert Logic. Zach and I will be wandering around over there, can give you some more specific information about what goes on in terms of the implementation, the information that's gathered, the way in which results can happen. We can actually talk a little bit more about the shared responsibility model. I think it's one of the great things that comes out of this conference that we're at today is a better understanding of the clarity that it provides. And you can also talk to Zach, who's actually been able to watch a really fast-growing business, make sure that security becomes part of that strategy, and then moves it forward in the AWS environment with Alert Logic.
Yeah, please, I'm going to go off the cuff since I flipped earlier. So reason I do this, obviously I'm not a natural speaker, and this is not my thing. To me though, if I can help protect somebody from having data loss, having that experience, I've gone through it myself once, so that's why I get out here and I try to speak a lot. And if there's something that I've figured out that you guys or you have questions about, I'll learn from you too. Find me out here. Don't be afraid to come up and say hi to me and let's talk.
Perfect. Zach, thanks very much. Thanks everybody for being here. We look forward to seeing you around the conference.
Thank you, gentlemen.